Meeting will be starting shortly. While we wait, let's learn more about Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well. thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. The meeting will be starting shortly. While we wait, let's learn more about Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Bi-Weekly Report with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.
Yeah, if you would. Nice to see you. Are you sure? Here we go.
Morning.
Hello. Hi. How are you?
Good for you.
I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves after I introduce you. How's that?
Sure. That's fine.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is the Exeter Housing Advisory Committee meeting, February 11th, 2022. I'm excited because we have our Congressman Chris Pappas here to talk to us. So I'm going to introduce him and then ask everyone in the room to introduce yourselves to Congressman Pappas and your title, or okay, and then we'll give the floor to the Congressman. Okay. It's an honor to introduce you all this morning to our speaker today. Congressman Chris Pappas is a lifelong resident of Manchester, New Hampshire. After graduating from Harvard, Chris returned home where he began a career in public service while helping run the Puritan restaurant. His family-owned business, it's 150 years?
Not quite.
105, rather.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, sorry. Trying to read through the fog.
Once you get over 100.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, right? Where you started working at age 14.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. From 2013 to 2019, Congressman Pappas then represented the 4th District of the New Hampshire Executive Council, working on several issues that included ways to support renewable energy and infrastructure projects. Elected to Congress in 2019, representing New Hampshire District 1, Congressman Pappas is the chair of the subcommittee on oversight and investigations for the House Veterans Affairs Committee. So please correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. Last minute gathering of information. Congressman also serves on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, where he's working on ways to modernize our nation's infrastructure and invest in projects that will create jobs and improve quality of life in New Hampshire. And this is what brings Congressman Pappas to talk to us this morning, to talk about the bipartisan infrastructure law. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And so I'm Nancy Belanger. I am the chair of the Housing Advisory Committee.
I'm Kathy Corson. I've sat on various boards and am currently a realtor for the last 11 years. So housing is very important to me.
Pete Cameron, Planning Board.
Good to see you.
Senior citizen.
Russell Dean, Town Manager. Good to see you, Congressman. Thank you.
Nice to see you again, Congressman Nico Papakostendis. I chair the Select Board.
Good to see you.
Jennifer Perry, Public Works Director, welcome and thank you for coming today.
Nice to be here.
Melissa Roy, Assistant Town Manager. Thanks for coming. Nice to see you.
Absolutely.
Good morning, Congressman. Nick Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of the Workforce Housing Coalition of the Greater Seacoast.
Morning.
And Tim Roach, Executive Director of Rockingham Planning Commission.
Hi, Sarah Tatarzik, Regional Planner with Rockingham Planning Commission.
Oh, great.
Sarah Reitzman, I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator at New Hampshire Housing.
Darren Winham, Economic Development Director. Dave Sharples, Town Planner. Great to have you here.
Morning.
Morning. Lindsay Sonnet. I sit on this committee and I also chair the Board of Workforce Housing Coalition.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to be with you and this entire group. And, I just think that housing is one of the most pressing issues that our communities are facing right now. I hear it everywhere I go. I was just up in the Mount Washington Valley for a day yesterday, and that is the issue that is on the top of everyone's mind because it has linkages to the economy, to travel and tourism, to workforce, certainly. And we know that the housing stock continues to not be where it needs to be in New Hampshire to support our needs for the future. And so this is a family issue, it's an affordability issue, it's an economic issue, it's a quality of life issue. And as we look at a community like Exeter, I'm really pleased that you all are coming together to have these kind of conversations, to make recommendations about, where the town and where the region needs to go for the future. I think there's going to be tremendous support in this bipartisan infrastructure bill that's going to help create the framework of success moving forward. And I can talk about a few of the components of the bill, and then maybe we can just open it up for discussion if that's okay with you. I'd love to hear, your input and recommendations to me and, any issues that we should be focused on in our work in Washington. The bill was signed into law back in November. And, I know I've had a number of conversations with town officials over the last few years about some of the urgent needs that exist here in town. Toward the wastewater treatment facility, heard a lot about the Squamscott River project that I think is going to be underway soon, if it's not already underway, which is sort of an emergency repair that I think we're going to continue to look for ways to try to find some funding for. But look, these issues are all connected. Whether you're talking about affordable housing, whether you're talking about, developing main streets or, road projects, we've got to look at, the whole entity of infrastructure. And I think that's what this bill does well. There's going to be significant increased funding for some of the traditional forms of infrastructure. So more money is going to flow through the state 10-year plan for roads and bridges. We're going to see increased funding available for transit, for rail through this bill, for our ports and airports, for the electric grid. But I think water is one of the keystone issues of this bill. It reauthorizes the state drinking water revolving fund as well as the wastewater revolving fund. And New Hampshire is going to see a huge bump in the amount of dollars that are coming in. And I think those dollars are going to prove to be a lot more flexible for communities to apply for them and to find that, they can be forgiven as grants. I think New Hampshire received its allocation already for 2022 under the bill, and I think it's something in the neighborhood of $72 million. One of the, I think, things that is most exciting about that fund is that up to half of those dollars are going to be forgivable as grants. So I think previously it was about 10% of the dollars under the state revolving funds could be applied as principal forgiveness. Under this bill, it's going to be something closer to 49–50%. So that's a significant increase that I think local communities are going to be able to take advantage of moving forward. There's also money for PFAS remediation, taking a look at replacing, lead water lines to the extent that there are any in the area. And we're happy to get all the details out in terms of, what this could mean for Exeter moving forward. I think what we know is that, we can give you kind of the national figures, but a lot of the bill is we're going to work to understand it over time. So we're going to have to kind of get into the details as rules are being written in Washington and really work with communities to make sure that they're taking full advantage of the resources that are available. So thank you for the opportunity to be here with you, and would love to hear a little bit more from the community about, where this might line up with the needs for the future.
So I'll let some of our department heads who are more expertise in those different areas. That's why we invited them here. One of the things that I am excited about this because we're learning that our housing problems, affordable housing, workforce housing, are really a regional issue. And it's really come to light, and it ties in with the economic development. Our businesses can't hire people if the people can't find a place to live. Some of the things that I like also, I'm also on the planning board as an alternate, and the walkability part, the infrastructure that will also include things like trains or things like Exeter. We have our train station, but there's a push for less parking for development, less parking spaces, and for us, that's a little difficult because we don't have buses that go through town for public transportation. So there's a lot in this bill. I like that it's going to be flexible and allow communities to kind of do what they need to do with it. So thank you very much for coming.
Yep. And certainly we want to stay in touch. I think, there are going to be opportunities that will roll out over the next 5 years.
I'll keep Carrie in
that's good.
We actually have a upcoming event. We had to move it because of COVID. We didn't feel with the numbers as high as they were at the moment. To have it then, so it's in May. We're going to have it at our town hall, and it's to try to get regional people together and talk about needs so that we can all kind of educate each other and what we can do to work together.
Oh, terrific.
So if you're available, we would love to.
Sure. We're happy to make ourselves available.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask the Congressman?
I'll let you go.
Well, I just wanted to thank you again for all your support and your understanding of the importance of water and wastewater and infrastructure. It's absolutely the bare minimum of what our communities need, and there's been a real challenge for communities of this size to get adequate funding. It's very difficult to put that full cost to the ratepayers, and just that recognition, I think, is huge. This is kind of the new day as far as us in water and wastewater go, to finally see, back to the 1970s era as far as support. And it's exciting because even though we've been addressing some of the major treatment facilities, we're an aged town. We have water lines that are vintage 1870s still. We have sewer lines that we honestly don't know the age of because they were sometimes old drainage systems that have been converted to sewer. And even though we've been working hard to address the needs, we know that the needs are almost unlimited. And we're fortunate in that we don't have any sewer mains any water mains that are lead. But we know in this age community that there are going to be lead service lines, the private part of the service lines that are still lead. We just encountered one last year and did do a removal when we found it, but it's kind of, it's everywhere. So being an aged community, it's really important. So we really appreciate that level of awareness and putting this on the forefront.
Well, I think it's been impressive to see the ways that the community has sought to make investments. And I think for the future, we just can't continue to ask ratepayers to, bear as significant a burden moving forward, given the number of legacy issues that exist and the number of investments that need to be made for the future. So this is really just about making sure the federal share is there in partnership with the state government to support whatever path you want to take. We'll continue to pay close attention to this moving forward, but we'd love to continue to work with the community to, make sure those resources are there to support you.
And if I could just weigh in, it speaks to affordability too, because as we've seen the investments in our water and sewer infrastructure tick up. We've also seen our rate increases in the neighborhood of 300 to 400% on the sewer side, which again lends that you talk about what makes a community affordable and be able to live in a community, and those rates are very, very high. So it's more important than ever that we have a backbone of other funding that we can look at and look to help us support the kinds of improvements that we really need to make. As Jennifer spoke, it's an aged system, and we have many, many projects that are still to come. So achieving funding for that is a real challenge.
I was going to jump in on the housing side, if you want us to at least speak to it from a regional perspective.
Sure.
Maybe the Exeter people can talk about their local initiatives. But as the Regional Planning Commission, we're responsible to do a regional housing needs assessment, where we look at the entire region, and essentially, end of the day, the bottom line product is a report out that shows the fair share of affordable housing in each community. Communities hate it. They don't want to be told that they don't have enough, or that they need more. And I think part of the problem with that approach is that they're not wrong necessarily. Places like Raymond or East Kingston or Kensington, they don't have the infrastructure to support the density. Exeter does, Portsmouth does, and the places close to Exeter and Portsmouth could, if we can get the infrastructure there. And I pick on Stratham. I live in Stratham, so they're not watching this, but they could. But there's an opportunity there, and the town knows it. The leaders in the town know, and they generally agree. But I think the problem is the taxpayers don't want to foot the bill at the local level. They don't want their property tax hit by this water, sewer infrastructure. So the opportunity to get more federal dollars as a grant opportunity, I think, would help a lot. 100% federal with no match would be even better. But that's what we need to do. Is I think we need to think about, when we talk about regional housing, and it is recognize that we're not going to be able to spread it all over the place, and that we're probably going to have to put the concentration in closer to where the infrastructure is in the more developed areas, and that's going to take a lot of work. So. This is an opportunity, I think, that we have with this bill. So,
I'm going to follow up a little bit on what Tim just said. Tim's reports are imperative to our smaller town reports to update our data. So we literally are ready to update our report, but without his data from the assessment needs, we just can't update our report. So his information is important for local communities and regional. So
it's on Sarah's shoulders.
Yes, it is. We're looking forward to Sarah's new to the Rockingham Planning Commission. Our committee kind of includes some of our townspeople, and Sarah Reitzman comes in, and we're kind of an eclectic group of people just trying to find what our issues are and trying to help look for solutions.
Well, that's great. And I'm glad you can kind of tap into those regional resources, because
they're so important.
One community can't be expected to solve this issue on their own. And what I found in our work is that I think there's an increased awareness and understanding that we need to address affordable housing, but some communities are pretty resistant to be part of the solution, to change ordinances or whatever needs to happen to facilitate the kind of development that.
Which is another thing that the Housing Advisory Committee tries to look into, what we can do with ordinances, with zoning and things like that. And that's kind of what our goal has been in the last few years, is to look at the issues and try to help educate and open up conversations to work together to find some answers, because there isn't going to be one size fits all. So we do recognize that.
Speaking of, so in my role at New Hampshire Housing, I spend a little bit of time looking at state legislature, but the vast majority of my time I'm looking at local zoning. It's really like this change to fix our housing crisis happens at the local level, and it happens with that local zoning. And so whenever I get an opportunity to talk with folks who work at the federal level, I'm always sort of curious and can't resist the urge to sort of pick your brain about, are there opportunities at the federal level to do something, are there tools that we can use that incentivize that zoning reform and start to undo exclusionary zoning?
That's a good question, and I know we've been thinking about that a little bit. Some of the traditional programs that support affordable housing have been wildly successful. You're familiar with a lot of them, things like home and the tax credits, the low-income housing tax credits. I think we can look to grow those. I think those in themselves provide the kind of incentive that we need. But you're right. I mean, you can't force communities to change their zoning laws to require or to allow more density for affordable housing, but you can incentivize it by looking at things like the tax code. What's that?
Why not?
Our issue is frankly, I'm militant about this, is that I don't agree with Tim. I think what we need to do is, I love him, but I think we have a carrot and we have a stick. We had a conversation with BEA on Monday, and Taylor Caswell is proposing to put money to towns that are trying to solve the workforce housing issues. But that's the carrot. What we need is a stick to try to force your Stratums to take water. Our town voted to give water to Stratum. Stratum turned it down. I don't think it's just because of the taxes. I think they're worried about it'll change. They don't want to have the multifamily and workforce housing along that corridor. And I think there has to be some sort of stick for some of these communities. Like, she's nodding. Like Northampton won't take water from Hampton. Who would be willing to provide it? So my point is, I think if we found a way to twist some arms, if we could, to some of these communities, and we haven't had a lot of luck at the state level. So anything you do that, you can do that would be really wonderful for all of us.
Yeah. And I don't know where the federal, nexus would be there. I mean, I think we need that kind of regional state perspective to understand, what will work here for New Hampshire. But your point's well taken. Are there ways we can look at these programs and make them more attractive so that communities will take that next step?
Yeah.
Would be happy to explore that a little bit more.
I'll go, because I got a question about kind of in the weeds on the bill. First, thank you for your holistic approach. I think everything's connected. Affordable housing is not necessarily a cause itself. It's like the center of larger issues. And long overdue on investment in our infrastructure. But in the rulemaking process, is it going to be a push for funding of prioritizing the rehabilitation of existing infrastructure or adding new? Because I'm a big proponent. I think what happens, like building rehabbing water line is important, but where it happens is even more important, without getting into a long, diatribe as to why. But I think prioritizing funding for the rehabilitation of existing infrastructure to increase that capacity that's already there is much more important and much more beneficial for our long-term financial stability than continuing to increase infrastructure out, because we have an issue with paying for the infrastructure we have now. And it seems a little ironic when people want to say, hey, let's add some more. It's like, well, take care of what you have and increase the capacity of what's there and improve density and so forth. Little trick, So just, do you know what it prioritizes? Is it going to prioritize funding for rehabilitation? Or?
I don't know on the waterfront. I know when it comes to transportation infrastructure, there's that focus in the bill on keeping the good roads good and maintaining networks first before you look at capacity expansion. We'll take a look at the water programs and see if there's any language there. I know there's some enhanced funding for disadvantaged communities, for rural communities in the bill, for equity. And I had a conversation with Mitch Landrieu, who's the former mayor of New Orleans, who's kind of the czar on infrastructure. And he was just saying that that's one of his focuses, is how can we make sure that these dollars go to communities that, have legacy issues before we're talking about, the next newest, greatest thing we want to do, or, expanding, systems beyond what they currently look like today. So I think there's that understanding that we got to take care of what we got first and deal with the backlog that exists, which, nationwide is, I think, $300 or $400 billion just on the water side. So we'll look into the details and see, what that looks like. But I think there's a way to kind of impact the way the rules are written moving forward. And I think you make a great point.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions or things that they'd like to bring up?
I want to say thank you again for your support for the sewer siphon project, and well, fingers crossed on the federal budget getting out of a CR, because that's a huge financial impact for us. And we're sort of holding some town ARPA money in case we don't get it. And obviously, we'd really like to be able to use that somewhere else. So thank you for your support on that. Very similar to what everyone's saying, sort of this concept of smaller projects, larger projects, existing versus new, and what do you feel like the opportunity for local communities access to this funding is. So I will tell you that we're very lucky. We found out we were the recipient of some ARPA state SRF funding, which is incredibly exciting. In Exeter, if you look at our town warrant that's coming up in March, we have a bike mobility study, we have intersection studies, we have infrastructure and water. We're trying to do the right things, but we just can't pay for it all. And we are trying to make the inroads. We have an economic developer and a planner and a DPW director that really look at the community as a whole, but as a region. And so we need to be able to try to get money here to our local community in a way that we can do it. We don't have a grant writer. We don't have a staff person that can work solely on this. So how accessible do you think that some of these funds are going to be to the actual local communities? We may not have a giant project, that looks really exciting to the federal government, but we have projects that are very important to us and the community and region, excuse me.
That's an important point, and I think is kind of connected to what I was saying about equity and the need to really ensure that there's capacity out there to make sure these dollars get to the places where they're going to be needed the most and utilized the best. And so I don't think a community should be disadvantaged because they might not have a huge professional staff of grant writers to be able to seize every opportunity. So that's part of our message to the administration is to make things as easy as possible and give support and build capacity where it might not exist today. With respect to the continuing resolution and getting an appropriations bill done, we expect to be back in a couple weeks. We hear there's a framework agreement, so we're continuing to push to include funding for the sewer siphon project as part of that. So stay tuned.
Yes,
but,
thank you.
Traditionally this would have been done by the end of the year, but for some reason, members of the appropriation committee couldn't get together and hash out a deal. But it looks like a deal's in the offing right now. So we'll make sure we keep you apprised of any developments.
We really appreciate that. It's a huge help to us here in the community. So thank you.
I would just echo that on what Melissa was saying there in terms of the small towns just having the understanding of how to access the funds. That's the one thing I've heard the most is we hear about, the transportation bill, but we don't really know how it gets down to the local level. And I agree that the need for grant writers, we have a small staff. We're not really funded to write the grants for the communities. I'd love to. And we'll do whatever we can to help you. Believe me, just call us. But that's another area where we could use a little bit of help in terms of maybe keeping in touch with Carrie and keeping us informed. Then we can get the word out to the communities on behalf of everyone. So
absolutely, and we've got what's sort of a Cliff Note version of the infrastructure bill, which is a 2,000+ page bill, but it kind of breaks it down section by section in terms of the different programs, and is actually pretty easy to understand. Okay, here's what this specific water infrastructure program does, here's who's eligible, and here's the process. So we're happy to communicate that. I don't know if that's in a form where we can share that with the town, but I think that might be helpful.
50 pages?
Yeah.
But you can kind of, it's got tabs and you can kind of find what sections are relevant.
I would like to say thank you because I would say between yourself and Carrie and your staffers, you are all wonderful at communication and getting back to us and helping us and getting answers. So I can just speak for myself. It's been really wonderful working with you in your office, so thank you for that. Senior transportation is also something that's a passion of mine in the Seacoast area. It is very limited. It is very difficult. We have we have residents that move here for our wonderful senior advantages and programs in this amazing state, and they get here and the transportation is incredibly limited. And so from a regional standpoint, I would love to sort of see some improvement in that as well.
Absolutely. We are a rapidly aging state, second oldest in the country.
Yes.
And we know that, I think there's certainly been a lot of focus on how do we make our communities attractive to young people, young families. Certainly more work to do there, but we also need to make sure that we're looking out for senior citizens too, and filling some of the gaps in transportation opportunities. It's certainly a partnership, and while some of the federal programs are going to see a significant increase, we'll also need to see the state step up in a more significant way to support some of these opportunities.
Thank you.
And I'm going to second Melissa's point, also as in the Budget Recommendations Committee. So as that process was unfolding, Melissa was able to come back and rest with numbers very quickly that our Budget Recommendation Committee was asking about funding. So while we're going through every line item on our budget, it was important to know what might be coming. So thank you to your staff. Pete.
I didn't thank you for coming earlier. I may be one of the few people in the room that's ever eaten in the famous restaurant.
Oh, okay.
I used to live in Bedford before.
Oh, you did? All right.
My question comes primarily, it's two-part. Will these grants, and I'll use that word, will those be time constrained? In other words, let's assume you get, or we're able to achieve $1 million, just roughly. Will there be timeframes within which that needs to be expended? And what form of reports will have to be filed? I know that's just getting into the weeds, but having experience where I live, we filed grants and received some funds, but they're constringent reporting requirements. Do you envision the same kind of requirements for these types of grants?
Well, I think some of the federal agencies probably are, building that process out right now to the extent that there are new grant opportunities available. I think for some of the traditional funding streams, those will grow through this bill, and probably the process won't look much different. So if you're talking about state revolving funds, that's a pretty well-known process. But I think, you raise an important point, which is making sure this is streamlined so that, yes, you do have some controls and make sure that the money is expended in the way that we all expect, but that a community isn't disadvantaged to have to jump through all these hoops to obtain the money and then continually report on it. So this is a 5-year bill, so it does give us some time to plan and think for the future. So it's not like, there's a deadline on a lot of these programs where we have to act by the end of the year. I think the notion is let's spread it out over those 5 years. Let's learn, where the money is working well and maybe where some areas aren't receiving these dollars, so we can make course corrections over time. So I think, we're interested in that kind of real-time feedback and communicating that to the relevant agencies of the federal government to make sure our communities have their needs met.
Thank you for that answer.
Well, thank you.
No, go right ahead.
I may have what sounds like a silly question, but it isn't really. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is a mouthful. What is the acronym or the common terminology that's being used on the Hill to refer to this? Is it?
Well, I think that's it. I call it the infrastructure bill because that's just the shorthand that I use because there's a lot under that umbrella, certainly.
Being an engineer, we always compress things into a good acronym that just rolls off the tongue, and I hadn't heard one yet.
It's not a good one.
Good.
Yeah, the IIJA, I don't know. That doesn't really roll off the tongue.
IFB.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think the way that the money has flowed from ARPA to the state has been very effective. We've been able to tap into those resources of almost up to $2 million as matches against various projects we have here locally. So, excuse me. However, However, that can continue with the way the money is going to flow from the federal government down to the state and to the local. I think that's a good framework and a good program and a good approach. Because it isn't rooted in loans or revolving funds and things like that. It's more of a grant-driven program, which I think is always the most effective to get that money to the local level where we need it the most.
Absolutely.
So.
We have 2 projects coming up that are capital improvement projects. We have the need for an improved public safety facility, and we have a DPW discussion on how to support our DPW, which in turn supports our roads and our infrastructure. I have been scanning the 400-page document, but I'm not seeing a lot of support for capital improvements in sort of facilities that support some of this infrastructure. Do you know of any? I know that's a very specific question, and I can get an answer from Carrie, but in your sort of dealings, have you heard anything that might help us in either of those projects?
I'm not aware through this bill, and we'll take a close look and communicate that to you. But I do know that there are certainly other federal programs for, facilities and emergency response and that are related to transportation. So maybe we can look even more broadly beyond just this legislation.
We'll check.
Is there one more question if anyone has it?
Not necessarily related to the infrastructure bill, but you mentioned that you were up in the Mount Washington Valley, and so I know that this must have come up yesterday, and it's been on my mind this week. If you hear anything brilliant about how to deal with short-term rentals, I think it's something that is impacting many parts of the state right now, and there is a bill in our state house right now that prohibits communities from prohibiting short-term rentals, so nice double negative in there. That came out of a Senate committee with an ought-to-pass recommendation. I think a lot of people are thinking about how do we regulate short-term rentals without it impacting our long-term housing stock. So I don't know if you've heard anything brilliant in conversations with communities about how they're already dealing with them, or if you do, please keep us posted.
Yeah, no, that issue comes up certainly in Mount Washington Valley, but all over New Hampshire. And there is this sense that there's an economic advantage for someone to do short-term rentals through things like Airbnb as opposed to, doing a long-term lease to someone who might be a worker or need affordable housing.
Yeah.
Of course, the housing that you see for these short-term rentals wouldn't always be the kind of affordable housing, that we need. So there is a little bit of that, but it's definitely a trend that I think is alarming. And also, just the state of real estate today. And you could speak a little bit more to the sort of upward pressure on prices and just, cash offers. If you're starting out today and looking for an affordable home, it's a tough market.
Right. I just put an offer on something in Dover that was under 400, and it had 19 offers.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate. As a mother of 3 adult children, 2 of them cannot afford to live here. One had to move to Texas, and the other one's going to be homeless. So, what do you do about that?
Yeah. So that's something we're watching, but I think it shouldn't take our focus away from just the lack of stock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, Sarah, because that's a concern of mine too.
Yeah.
So, Congressman, thank you so much for coming this morning. I'm sure if anyone has any follow-up questions, they can send them to Carrie.
Absolutely.
And we really do appreciate your time and your work.
Yeah, well, thanks for making some time for me. I appreciate it, and do all stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well.
Okay, so we're going to take a break, and everyone can stand up and stretch ball.
Okay.
Let the Congressman get on to the next schedule.
I will, but he's going to come out this way.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.